For this portion of paragraph lesson 22, you're going to want to turn to what should be worksheet 4. It's the 4-paragraph tall tale outline, and you will want to highlight it like you see on the screen, as well as fill in all of the blanks. So, introduction, you're going to introduce the story of the main character. This is where you want some kind of hook, kind of some sort of figure of speech put in right there to pull your audience into the story. Then you're going to give the background of your chosen character and say when and where he was born and raised, he or she. And then also when and where regarding the time frame of your story. Your main character needs to have a job and some kind of unusual talent typical within tall tales. Your character is either extremely large or extremely strong. Somehow, either one or the other or both will typically tie into the story. And then you need some kind of catalyst and situation, some kind of problem they're basically trying to solve. Then you're going to move right here. The blue part is the beginning of your second paragraph. Remember, you have to have a transition between the two. And then here we have the solution. So here you're going to talk about the problem, what's happening. But then in your third paragraph, you're going to talk about how they went about solving the problem. And then your fourth paragraph, that's where it starts off with green. You have the results as far as what was the outcome of the solution. Kind of how are you wrapping everything up. So what people came to think about your person, what was learned about them. These are just ideas. What was learned by others in the story, what people came to think of themselves, what did they learn about other people. These are questions that typically if you answer them, it will give you that paragraph. And then conclusion, what was learned, the message. What key kind of moral of the story were you trying to teach? And remember, your tall tale must have 20 different figures of speech with 16 of the 20 written with hyperbole, either hyperbole by itself, or you may combine it with a simile, or instead of hyperbole, you are also welcome to use personification because that is also seen in tall tales. And so you are allowed to use personification instead of hyperbole and it will still count. So make sure all of that is filled in and highlighted. This is how your outline should be formatted when you bring it in. This part is kind of going over some ideas on tall tales. This is not what you want to do necessarily. You may pull an idea from here, but this is not an example of a finished tall tale. All of these things are kind of included into tall tales specifically about Paul Bunyan. Because Paul Bunyan himself is a tall tale character, there is no such person as Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan was an industrious man. He is credited with logging off most of North America, Maine and Michigan, California, Oregon, and Washington, even logged off Minnesota and North Dakota. Babe, conveniently stomping all the stumps into the ground, creating the 10,000 lakes. You'll notice these things are impossible for one person to do, but Paul Bunyan is considered a larger-than-life type of character. So these kind of incredible stories are told about him and his ox, Babe. He herded whales in the Great Lakes. He dug the Mississippi to irrigate corn in Illinois that grew so fast he had difficulty chopping it down. He dug Puget Sound as a port for Seattle, tossing the dirt into piles called Mounts Rainier and Baker. When the folks in Bellingham refused to pay him, he started throwing it back, creating the San Juan Islands. There are statues and stories of him in the California redwoods. Babe the Great Blue Ox ran away with a plow one day and dug the Grand Canyon. Now, for your tall tale, you are welcome to either make up a story or you could take one of these and basically write a full 4-paragraph story on it, such as you could talk about how Babe ran away with a plow one day and dug the Grand Canyon. You would just need to come up with some kind of problem and sort of tell how all of that happened. All right, these are other famous tall tale characters which you may use. Calamity Jane, she was one who was a cowgirl. Because these stories were made famous in kind of the American frontier, you have a lot of stories about cowboys, cowgirls, loggers, railroad men. Those are the typical ones. Casey Jones was a railroad engineer. Davy Crockett, he was an actual man, of course, instrumental with especially Texas and Tennessee. But there are some tall tale type stories told about him. Paul Bunyan was a logger. Pecosville, he was a cowboy. John Henry was a railroad man. Mike Fink was a boatman. Molly Pitcher, I believe she was actually a real person. Revolutionary War, she aided soldiers. And then Johnny Appleseed, he was a real man. He planted apple trees and he spread the gospel. Things that are told about him that tend to be a little bit more tall tale are that he was able to befriend all of the woodland type creatures. So whether it was, bears or birds or fish, that sort of thing, he could talk with all of them. They were all his friends, which is really not possible. This blank down here is just left in case you want to create your own character, or you are welcome to go online and kind of find other stories and make them fit. But what you may not do is go online and just copy and paste a story into your Microsoft Word document and turn that in as your rough draft. You would actually have to take it and make it fit, which I have actually done for you, which we'll see. Let me go here. This is a place, AmericanFolklore.net. It has some different tall tales. I went here and just kind of read through some different ones. They will not typically fit perfectly into the format, which is great. And you're welcome to take these and elaborate on them. I clicked on this one called Old Stormalong. And this is the little thing that it gives me. Now everyone knows that Alfred Bulltop Stormalong was the ultimate sailor. He was the captain of a mighty ship known as the Courser, which was so wide that she couldn't sail into Boston Harbor, and so tall that the mast was hinged in the middle so it could be taken down to avoid the sun and the moon whenever they passed by. Her keel was so deep that no harbor in the world could take her, so she spent all her time in deep water. There's some excellent examples of hyperbole that are in here. The Courser went through the English Channel once. It was a tight squeeze. Old Stormalong had the sailors coat the entire outside of the ship with soap. Even then, Old Stormalong barely slid the boat through, and so much soap scraped off one side of the boat at Dover that the cliffs there became permanently white. After that, the English very politely asked Old Stormalong to go around the long way, and that is what he did. The deck of the Courser was so long that the sailors had to ride horses at a full gallop from stern to stern when it was their turn to keep watch. Old Stormalong was the only man strong enough to handle the wheel of the Courser, and it took all of his muscle to prevent the ship from knocking down the smaller Caribbean islands whenever a hurricane blew into the ship. So I took elements of that and I put it into here. But I also added some stuff to it as well. So you're welcome to actually copy this because I did not fully fill it out. You will have to add more stuff to it. But you're welcome to use this for your tall tale because I find these to be a little bit harder to kind of figure them out. So Captain Stormalong, a captain, select the scenes. I chose the English Channel. He was super strong, could wrestle an octopus, steer a ship that no man could steer. I just kind of jotted down a couple of things, sort of pulling from that and another story about him. A problem or situation, or possible situation or problem they could deal with. I kind of crafted this story. People in Amsterdam needed medicine, but a ship could not fit through the English Channel. Remember, if I go too quickly, just pause it and keep writing. So, okay, paragraph organization. State your topic. I had Alfred Bulltop Stormalong, that was his full name. I decided that the message of my story was going to be hard work is rewarded. Remember your figures of speech. When you come into class after spring break, you will have to write out all 20 figures of speech and identify which ones are hyperbole. And I've given you some different ones even in the brainstorming, but you will have to figure out all 20 figures of speech. All right, introduction, characters, and setting. Where and when born? I said he was born in Massachusetts in the late 1700s. A great way to bring in hyperbole is to talk about the weather. So I talked about how it was so cold, the cows gave ice cream. You could also say it was so cold that snowmen came inside to get warm, or something like that. That would be hyperbole. The snowmen coming inside, that would be more of personification. But they're both very, very, very prevalent within Tall Tales. Now moving on to where and when the actual story take place. So I moved to the English Channel in the mid 1800s. Tall Tale character personality, he's rather eccentric. Outstanding things was this person capable of doing. There is another story on about him right here, Stormalong and the Octopus. You could possibly take a couple of elements of this and include it in the beginning and kind of retell just a very small smidgen of how he went to the bottom of the sea, wrestled an octopus in order to keep the anchor from ripping a hole in the world and causing all the water to spill out into space. Something like that would be a great thing to include at the beginning in this first paragraph. Just giving you examples of the type of strength as well as bringing in the hyperbole. Everyday job, he was a captain. The current situation was the people in Amsterdam needed medicine desperately. So that was the cargo that was on his ship. He was trying to get it from, let's say, Massachusetts to Amsterdam. So the problem, though, the ship, the Corsair, could not fit through the English Channel. So this is where you can talk about, go into a lot of hyperbole as to the size of the ship. So huge, the sailors had to gallop across the deck to keep watch at night. The mast was hinged so it would not hit the sun. So you could talk about how the ship was larger than Texas. Different things like that, which would bring in the hyperbole, emphasize the size, and talk about how it could not fit. You could talk about the different ways they tried to get it to fit. But this is talking about the problem. So the solution, they coated the sides with soap. That was just the basic solution, but I would elaborate on that much, much further. How they decided to, how they decided to coat the sides with soap, how quickly they had to do it, how tight of a squeeze it was. So the first mate, Skinny Sam, could fit through a keyhole, but could barely fit between the ship and the cliffs. Just to give some idea of like how tight it was. The sailors, faster than lightning, painted the sides with soap. Again, right here, this is faster than lightning. It is a simile as well as a hyperbole. Bringing in the word than works well to create hyperbole with a simile. And remember, you are welcome to copy this, but you do not have to. The results, Amsterdam made Captain Stormalong their official captain because he risked his ship for them. England asked him never to use the English Channel again. And you could talk about how up here in paragraph 3, at the end, the sides of the cliffs became permanently white because of all the soap. And you also need to talk about the results on he was able to bring the medicine in time and the whole city was saved. And then the conclusion, serving others and giving, what you have is what life is about. So that could be your final message at the very end. So you will need to take this, you will need to expound upon it, and then outline it and write it into a rough draft, making sure to have all 20 figures of speech in that rough draft. I would underline them if I were you, to make them much easier whenever you have to write them out by hand in class. Okay, so just looking over your assignment, Mindbender, remember your Making Sense poem. The brainstorm, whenever you write the story, this has to be in your own words, and it needs to follow the format. And you have to have 20 individual figures of speech. So if you have a hyperbole as well as a simile, that counts as one figure of speech, not two. And use participle openers to start at least 4 sentences in your tall tale. That should be it. Email me or call me if you have any questions.